Okay. We now come to our major event of the evening, which is the presentation of the 2022 proposed township budget. And I assume that Mr. Walsh will lead this parade.
Thank you very much, Mr. Supervisor. Good evening, Board.
I wanted to walk through the annual budget
presentation with you. We're presenting a $57 million
to you this evening. Before I do that, I want to thank the team that was involved with us, namely our Finance Director, Mary Madison, Deputy Manager Derek Perry, and our entire management team, who are all here this evening as well. I'm going to put up the... When you consider the budget, the total budget's $57 million. When you consider the general fund expenses are a little over $26 million, with revenue just over $24 million. I think the shortfall this year is about $2.4 million. And one might think, well, we have a structural deficit. We don't have the revenue to pay for our expenses. And that would not be the case at all. You can take out a couple one-time expenses that are recommended. For instance, the redevelopment fund at $2 million. And then we have $500,000 recommended to go into our IT, $160,000 for retention payments. That's $2.7 million. So if we wanted to take out some one-time expenses, we would not have a structural deficit at all. I want to walk through a presentation covering the general fund, the entire budget, as we normally do, and then we'll take questions, I guess, later on. So I want to, first of all, before we talk about 2022, I want to look back at our investments that we've made in the community going back over the last 8 years. First of all, the fire department, and I'm not going to read all of these. I know you all have a copy in front of you, but the investment that's made in the fire department is substantial. In addition to everything else that we've done as far as some staffing and other, we've committed $6.5 million over the last 8 years, from anywhere from the new fire station to a number of ambulances. We purchased a new pumper, and of course the new ladder truck. And for the police department, it's $1.3 million. So we've been our investments have been very heavy on the fire side and not so much on the police side. But we've had some academy sponsorships that came about, some body cameras, radar systems, and we've purchased 3 new vehicles per year, 2 additional officers. We've made good investments in the police department, but not as much if you look at the dollar amount as the fire department. Parks and Recreation, we've had a $9.5 million commitment to the Parks and Rec, a very strong commitment, probably led by the Towner Road Park and some land preservation, even down to the new courtyard at the Senior Center for $50,000, but about $9.5 million into the park system just in the last 8 years. And IT, $1.2 million that we've placed into the IT department. Public Works and Streets, significant contributions over the last 8 years into Public Works and the lift stations and water mains that we've covered, and then also our streets. Even before the millage for the streets that came about in 2019, we made substantial improvements, investments into our street system, going all the way back to Cornell Road in 2013. If you recall, we had the big, if you were here, we had a packed room that night in May of 2013 for the widening of Cornell Road, the trees and all of that, the 400 trees that were going to be taken down. So I remember that because it was my second day here in Meridian Township. But anyway, we made substantial improvements for our streets and public works. Communications, likewise, over $500,000 of investments into our, and this doesn't take into account the staffing. These are improvements that we've made to the communications department, anything from video production to software to storage and switches. Let's look at the 2021 action plan that was developed by the board for the areas that we wanted to cover in this year's budget. So this was your goals that you set in December of 20 for 2021. So now we're looking back some 10 months later to see these are the things. If you take a look at what the board said, this is the investments we want to make in our budget going forward: sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, improvements in the PICA areas, Hazlet and Okemos, implement our first of our 3-year local road program. It's a 10-year program, but this was the first year. Redesign the township website, branding on our signage, trying to improve our signage. Some of the signage is from that we have out there is from 1970. And then complete phase 1 and 2 of the pathway to MSU to Lake Lansing, and then broadband. Those were the main issues that the board set out back in December of 20 that said we want to attack these areas in 2021. What are our budget goals for 2022? When you take a look at the $57 million spending plan, what is really the focus? The focus is, again, continuing on our pension and legacy cost. That's a promise that we made in 2017 to the voters, and we'll cover more of that later. Investment in the PICA'S, the Village of Okemos project, and of course the Downtown Hazlet project, which includes Pine Village. Local roads, IT, environmental sustainability, and public safety. If you want to take a look at our $57 million spending plan that's before you this evening, it really focuses on these 6 areas. Number 1, pension. And again, this goes back to the millage that was approved by the voters in 2017 to eliminate our pension debt going forward. Now, let's talk about our pension debt.
Where are you trying to go?
Forward.
That's moving forward.
Yeah, it is now. So pension funding levels, we have 6 different pensions that we look at, from the Public Works Group, Police Patrol, Fire, and on down, Police Command. And this shows you where they were funded as a percentage in 2020 and where they're funded at right now. And then our overall funding for our MERS pension. And this is the pension fund. And I hope you'll keep this in mind as you vet this budget and look forward. We're in a really good financial position, but I hope you remember that we are still $28 million in debt. One of the worst things you can do when you start to get into a better financial position is to start spending, because that may have occurred in this township many years ago with the pensions, with the COLA, and all the benefits that were provided that proved to be unsustainable. And that's how we got up into the $30 to $35 million in debt. And then you add retiree health care onto that, and you add our township pension fund. We were $36 or $37 million underwater just 8 years ago. We've reduced that down to $28 million. We've improved our MERS pension fund. Again, we're still $28 million in debt, and approximately 26 of that 28 comes from police and fire. Our fire pension fund is underfunded by about $15 million, 15 plus, and our police is approximately 9 or 10. So this shows you where we are with our MERS pension debt. What about modifying our pensions, which we did back in 2017? Is it working? And here are the numbers, and these aren't my numbers, these are actuarial numbers from people who know how to figure this stuff out. But as you can see, our administrative professionals is 113% funded, Public Works nearly 90, and Fire just over 90. So in one case, you have the fire pension that exists prior to 2017, which is $15 or $16 million underfunded, and we're in debt, and it's basically 40-some, 50, maybe 50% funded, and the new pension fund is 91% funded. So the answer is, did we make the decisions that we made in 2017 as a group? Has it worked? It's obviously worked very well for the township. And this is a slide we show every year. It's an actual page. It's from the actuarial report ending December 31 of 20, and it says, again, every year we look at this number. If you want to pay off your pension in 10 years to get to 100% funding, you need to pay a month, $395 instead of $271. The $271 is our ARC. ARC, actual required contribution. They take our liabilities and our assets and they tell us what we need to pay per month. And that's $271,000 a month. But if you want to pay it off in 10 years and accelerate your payment, you should pay $395 a month. In this budget, we're recommending we pay $434,000, almost $435,000 per month, in excess of even the 100% number that MERS pays out. And here's their actual contributions in page 15 of this report that lays out exactly how we would pay that. The police and fire would get $750,000. That comes from the 2017 millage, right? The $1.5 million. What is our required ARC payment of 3.2? Total contribution that we're required to pay is $4.7 million. But we're not paying $4.7 million. We're paying $5.217. We're paying like $450,000, $470,000 more that's required. And what are we paying on? Remember, we're not taking the MERS accepted or suggested 7.35 rate of return on our investment. We're using a 5.35 rate of return, as we promised our voters that we would do. So we were far exceeding our obligations when it comes to pension. The real story when it comes to pension is right here. Back in 2013, we faced nearly a $5 million deficit on retiree health care and just about $2 million on the township pension fund. So we had about 6.7 in debt. That debt is separate from the debt from MERS, right? MERS was about 32 to 34, now it's down to 28, but plus we had this 7. So we were pushing $40 million in debt just in 2013. And this 6.7 million has been paid off. It's been paid off by being very wise and prudent over the last 8 years and investing much more than what's required to pay. And as you can see, back in 2013, we were 54% funded with retiree health care, 68% funded with the township pension fund. And as you can see, they both are now 100% funded. Our annual contribution is $18,000, or we have $18,000 in debt for retiree health care. So great news that we've paid that off over time. It matters, and I'll tell you why it matters. If you take a look, and this is a very important slide for this presentation, and this is what I've been saying all along. If you go back to my budget report to the board in 2014, if we could reduce our debt, the monies that are going in there will allow the township to do a whole lot. If we can reduce our ARC down and our payments our available revenue goes up, and we have an opportunity to do projects like before you tonight, right? We're doing some very significant things with our additional revenue. Well, how does that come about? Well, here's the slide that tells you that. Go back to 2019, just 2 years ago. What were we paying for retiree health care and our township pension fund? The answer, $700,000. That's what we were paying just 2 years ago. And remember, we talked about if we can get that paid down, what our financial picture would look like going forward. I didn't know we were going to be able to pay it down in the next 2 years, but now what's our contribution this year? It's $235,000. Nearly $500,000 is now freed up in available cash to the township because we've paid off. It's a very important slide, one that I would remember going forward from this presentation. Investment, that's all for pension. Number 2, PICA'S. And one, it's an important component of our budget recommendation. And right now we have a redevelopment fund that's $700,000, and we're recommending that be increased to $2 million to available for a public-private partnership in the 2 PICA areas. You see, we had demolition, but when it comes to downtown Okemos, we're looking at DDA funding, Brownfield Redevelopment Authority funding, Meridian Redevelopment Fund funding, Eagle funding from the state, and potentially Smart Zone. All the different funding sources that are available to us for the Village of Okemos project. And thankfully, over the last 8 to 9 months, we've been able to see the demolition occur at the site. We continue to work on the Pine Village project. We spoke with them just as of last week. They continue to talk in very positive terms, like the project's going to move forward, and we certainly hope so for the northern part of our community. Number 3, so we have pension, we have PICA'S, and number 3, we have Fix Our Roads. And as you can see, we continue to put in additional funds. We made a big promise to our voters in 2019. We said, we are not going to play a shell game with you. If you give us this funding, this $3.5 million, we're going to use it all for roads. A lot of communities would take out their administrative cost, and they would stop making their contribution. Because remember, we make a $250,000 supplemental payment, right, to roads. We have for years. But what also, we get $172,000 $200,000 from the county, right? So we get over $400,000 in this supplemental funding. What a lot of communities would do is shove that over and move that shell over, and then they'd put in 3.1 and then this other funding, and they would free up some funds. Not in Meridian Township, not when we make a promise. So when you take a look at our road funding tonight, it will be the $3.5 million that we committed, and on top of that will be the funds that I just covered. And our roads program will be over $4 million because we're keeping our promise to our residents. And this shows our contribution right here of $3.9 million, just about $4 million. And you can see before it was $1 million. And this is due, of course, to the 2019. But as you can see, what I just illustrated, $3.5 million plus the 280 plus the 172. We're using all of that to fund local roads. And this just shows the prioritization of the $3.5 million for reconstruction and $450,000 for preventative. We also said we're not just going to put it all into restoration. We're going to do some preventative maintenance so that the 5s and 6s on the PICA'S rating can stay at 5 and 6 and they don't become 3s and 4s in the next couple years. And I just want to applaud the work that Manager Perry's done with this road funding over the last years. Is it working? I love the matrix. I want to see if it's working, right? The pension's working really, really well. Local, it's all working for us. So our PICA'S rating, pavement surface evaluation and rating study. That's how all communities in Michigan rate their roads. And our goal is to get to an 8, which would be a really quality road system. Well, as you can see, we were at a 4.83, and you can see where we need to be every year to get to the 8 rating. And so in 2022, we need to be at a 5.53 next year. And this is not my number. This is not Manager Perry's number. This is the engineer's review of our system based on the PICA'S rating. You can't fudge that. As you can see, we need to be at a 5.53 to stay on course to get to an 8 at the end of 10 years, and we'll be at a 5.64. So yes, we've surpassed it in every year of the local road program so far, and we'll continue to do so. The fourth thing, so we've got pension, PICA'S, local roads, and the fourth thing is IT infrastructure. When you talk to our administration over the IT department, they tell you we have a system that really needs to be enhanced. It perks the ears of a number of us. And so we have a committee put together, and we even are recommending $500,000 in this year's budget to pay for the IT infrastructure. Moving on, to sustainability. There's 2 things that we're looking to do in the 2022 budget when it comes to the environment and sustainability. And one is we have a $500,000 grant request into Eagle to totally overhaul our recycling center up in Hazlet. So that's number one, the issue that we're working on. And number 2, Consumers Energy is right now doing an analysis for us on the potential of moving all of our fleet to an electric, moving it from where we are now to an electric fleet. And so those are the 2 things that are going to be going on in the next few months: recycling center and potentially an electric fleet for our township. And finally, public safety. You know, this is if you look at our survey results, this is what residents want out of the community, police and fire services. And as you can see from 2017, now we had 30 fire paramedics and 39 police for years. So our total was 69. And we talked about trying to increase that. Well, now, if this budget's approved, we're going to add 1 additional firefighter. We've added 2 additional firefighters before, 2 police before. So we'll have increased our force, our overall force by 7%. We'll have increased our fire department by 10% from going from 30 to 33. So we've made great progress. As the community grows, so does our public safety department. Now, if we could just find the ability to recruit and fill those positions, that would be even better. But we're doing everything we can to get there. That is an overview of everything from the PICA'S to local roads to pension to IT to environmental sustainability and our public safety. Those are the 6 components of this budget in 2022, and that's what we planned on doing it. Anywhere from $500,000 to IT to increasing our fire department by another personnel. or one additional personnel, I should say. 2021 developments, I'm not going to read all those to you, but we did see some good developments. We didn't see in the two areas, we have not gone vertical in Okemos and Hazlet in those two key PICA areas, but we have had some nice developments. In fact, this may surprise you, but we have a figure in our budget of $600,000 for building permits that we're going to bring in a year, right? And typically we hit that number sometime, we typically hit the number, a couple years we haven't, but typically we hit that number around October, and into November we always typically hit that number. Well, that number, and you may think, wow, we really haven't had the kind of development that we've had in the past. It's not true. We hit that number. If you take a look at the last 8 years, we hit that number the second, if this makes sense, the second earliest time throughout the year in the last 8 years. We're already at our $600,000 in revenue in that department. So if you compare the last 8 years, this is the second best year. It may not be the best number, but it's the fastest we've gone to that receiving those funds for the building department. So I thought that was a little bit surprising. Comparable communities on tax base. I hope you find this of interest. It's our population and our tax base of $1.9 billion. You compare that to Muskegon with 38,000 people and $500 million. East Lansing, more population, but less than half of the tax base in Meridian Township. Delhi Township, you could actually add Delhi and East Lansing together. You'd have 74,000 people in those two communities. 74,000, we have 44. Our tax base is higher than both of them. And then of course we're approaching Lansing's tax base of $2 billion. And really the only comparable community to us in here would be Midland. Midland's population is almost identical to ours, and of course with Dow there, they have just over $2 billion. They're ahead of us by about $100 million. But otherwise, we really, if you take a look at our tax base is comparable to the communities, we stack up very well, which is really important, right? That's the investment in your community. 2020 census turned out extremely well for us, an 11% growth from 39.6 to 43.9. Not really alarming growth. It's smart, controlled growth. It's 1% per year. But let's compare that to other communities like we did with the tax base. Muskegon, over a 6% loss. East Lansing, about flat, a little bit of a loss. Delhi, a 7% growth. Delta, 2. Lansing, this number, I'm not sure it's correct because everything I've seen in Lansing is they went down a little bit, but everything we pulled up on the census number shows a positive number there. Bay City, just like Muskegon, went down over 6%. Again, it's hard to find like communities that went up double digits like Meridian Township. They're out there, but let me tell you, when you look at those numbers, you got to look at the population, because if you have a community of 4,000 and they go up by 1,000 people move in over 10 years, they go up 25%, right? So you got to take a look at, when you get into these larger communities, it's really difficult to get double-digit growth. It really is. So that's, when you build great farmers markets and you do the things that this township has done, that's how you see, and you have the educational that we have, system that you have, and you have the public safety departments we have, this is what happens with your growth. And getting into the Parks and Rec projects that we funded through our Parks Millage with the Harris Nature Center and the Central Meridian Regional Trail and the Gateway and Historical at the Historical Village. If you haven't been out to the Nature Center and see the new developments out there and the work that Director Maisner's team has done, you're really missing out. Stop out. Except I think the parking lot's going to be closed one day this week, if I recall. But make sure you stop out and take a look at the work that's occurred out there. Police Department, what's in here? 41 officers, 5 new police cars. We're adding back in a records position. We had requests for 9 different staffing positions in this budget, and we've approved a position in the police department and a police position in the fire department, and then an educational reimbursement program and a new generator for the building, and then of course we have our contract with Williamstown Township. I will tell you that one thing this board's going to have to think about, not tonight, but I'm just looking ahead, right? Think ahead, maybe past tonight, think about the next year or two, and that's our contract with Williamstown Township. We have tried everything and I mean everything, to increase our police numbers, right? And we're at 36 or 35 today. And we've done some really great things, or we wouldn't be at 36 or 35. We might be at 30. We're not going to hit, I'm just going to tell you, it's highly unlikely we will hit 41. I don't know what we'd have to do to get to 41. I wouldn't want to think about what we'd have to do to get to 41. We're going to try, and Chief Plaga and Director Tehoff have done everything they can to get us to 41, but we're at 36. It might be 35. One of the things you have to think about is Williamstown Township in the next couple years, and maybe next year when a contract comes up. Right now, we supplement 2 officers to Williamstown Township. And if we can't get our numbers up, it's a $240,000 contract. We may have to look at, and that's a board decision, not our decision, but you may want to look at next year when that comes up. Does it make sense for the township anymore when we can't get to 41? Director Madison was at Western Michigan on Friday. She ran into a nice young man. I think he may have been given the tour, and he's going into law enforcement. She's trying to recruit on her daughter's road trip or college trip. That's what we're doing. I was at the Big Ten party store, and a young man waited on me. Nice African-American young man, just outstanding customer service. I offered him a job. So we'll put you through the academy. It just so happens that our officers know the young man because he was involved in our youth program up in the northern part of the community. It didn't work out, but I'm telling you, we do everything we can to recruit law enforcement, and it's going to really struggle to get to 41. So Williamstown Township next year is something you may have to consider whether that makes sense. Fire department, we had 30, we went to 32. We're recommending that go up to 33. And just so you know, we do have a grant request in through SAFER. It's SAFER, a SAFER grant. It's for adding fire and emergency response, SAFER. And we have a grant in for 4 full-time firefighters. And if we get that, they fund 100% for the first 3 years, and then it's 100% of the township past that. And I know that the city of Marshall just received the grant a couple weeks ago. We have the application in. If we don't get it, we'll reapply in 2022 as well. So that's something we're looking at doing. I understand the goal is to get back to 36, although I think 36 may have been 15 or 20 years ago that we had that many, but it's a goal that we have to get back to. In one way or another, I'd like to see us get there. We can't do it in 1 year, and we've done a lot to increase and augment our firefighter and paramedics, and we have a plan to get there. And then we'll also have another ambulance in this budget and another siren. Now keep in mind, these little things that you forget about. You forget about when we inherited this operation 8 years ago, we had 4 emergency sirens. And I remember Director Mazur coming to me and saying, we're looking at putting a siren at Walsh Park. And that's great. Well, that's our 5th one. I said, well, how many do we need? Well, we need 15. So again, we set out a goal. Let's get to 15. We couldn't do it in 1 year, just like we can't add all the firefighters in 1 year. But we set a goal, and now we're implementing our 11th siren in next year's budget. Motor pool purchases. I won't go through all of them. I've covered some of them before, but we're taking care of parks and pathways and public works and fire and police. And here's another thing. I'm sure nobody remembers, but I do. When I came here in 2013, what was the fund balance in the motor pool, which is where you buy all your equipment from? $75,000. The purchases in 2012 were over $1 million. That's how I remember what year the police chief's vehicle is, because it was purchased in 2012. We came here, we had no money in the motor pool fund. And if you remember, the next year was slim pickings for the motor pool. And then the very next year, we set money aside, we paid cash for a sewer vac. So we've built that fund up. And as you can see, our fund balance now in the motor pool is approximately $650,000. So we've taken it, we've really invested heavily in our ambulances, our police vehicles, we've bought a new pumper, and we've built up our motor pool fund over time. And I'm proud of where we've gotten to with our motor pool. General fund capital expenditures, $900,000. Again, IT is 500,000 of that, the public safety generator, and some other things, some improvements at the Okemos Library with a new roof, and improving the treasurer and clerk's break room. Water and sewer available cash, as you can see, there's a slide of about $500,000 in the water fund and about flat in the sewer fund from year to year. Here's some of the upcoming water and sewer projects that you can expect to see. Anywhere from Tower Garden meter project to Dobie Road to Grand River. $1.1 million on the water side and $700,000 on the sewer. Things you don't even notice, $1.8 million of utility work that'll be going on. And that's in addition to the work we're doing with East Lansing, right, with the water resource recovery facility. I call them wastewater plants, but everyone has a different term for them. A rate comparison study. We hear a lot about water rates and sewer rates. As you can see, we compare really well to our neighbors when it comes to water and sewer cost to our residents. It's hard to find anyone who has as low rates as us in the region and beyond. Let's talk about the promises that we made in 2017. We said we were going to budget for 41 officers. We have. We said we were going to budget for 32 firefighter paramedics, and we have. In fact, we're going beyond that with this budget to take us to 33. We said we're going to contribute $1.5 million per year to police and fire pensions. We've gone beyond that. As you can know, remember, we're required to put 4.7 in. We're putting 5.2 in. We're putting an additional almost $500,000 into police and fire pensions. We said we'd set aside $250,000 a year for a ladder truck. We did that. We now have $1 million. The truck is on order. 2019 with roads, we said we're going to contribute 100% of the local millage to roads, no administrative cost. We've kept that promise and went beyond that. And we said we're going to attain higher ratings with our PASA rating. We've done that. We're exceeding where we need to be to get to an 8. And we're going to take over the local road program and administer it ourselves. We've done that. And we're going to provide our own staff on site. By the way, that's Niall Nunn, a local resident in our engineering department. Been here about 10 years, and he's just an outstanding member of our team. Staffing changes, we're recommending increasing by 1.5 positions. And the reason that's not 2 is because the police records position is at part-time, and we're moving that to full-time. It was full-time prior to COVID. A summary of our staffing changes. We're at 161, going up to 163, which would put us back on our number pre-COVID. What are our challenges? You know, it's very rosy, but it's not all rosy. You got to have challenges, right? We have $28 million in overall pension debt. As I mentioned earlier, 15 of that's from the fire department. 10 million of that is police. So if you look at it, just over 25 million of the 28 million is in 2 departments, the police and fire. Recruiting of police officers and paramedics, although we're having more success on the paramedic side than we are with the police department side. I think we're fully staffed now at 32 in the fire department. And again, we're about 5 short on the police side. Our antiquated IT infrastructure and recruiting and retaining talent. And to that end, what are we doing about recruiting and retaining talent? Well, we're doing a lot of things. One is that we have flex time. Non-police and fire all have flex time where they only work 7.5 hours a day. We give a half hour per day, which, by the way, equals like 3 weeks of extra vacation time a year. It's a big deal, especially for those parents who have children who are trying to get them to school, being able to come in at 8:30 instead of 8 o'clock work. So you work either 8 to 4:30 or 8:30 to 5. And it's up to you and your department and work that out. We have casual wear. Casual wear is one of the most important things we offer. If you ask our team, casual wear is really important on that list. We used to have it maybe 4 times a year, and now it's year-round. And some people don't like it. They don't think it's I think you have to do all of these things to recruit people to the organization right now. And I'll tell you, when we used to put out a note about casual wear, it was one of the most popular things where I got the feedback from our team members. We have great holiday pay, personal leave, vacation time, sick leave, long-term disability, and pensions. We have a health savings account. We did an analysis last week that we pay if you use all your deductible, which a lot of our employees don't use all their deductible. But we based it on everyone who uses the full deductible, right? So we pay at a minimum 93% of your health care. That's the premiums plus the HSA. We pay a minimum of 93 and as high as 98% of your total health care. Now, that's for people who use the full deductible. If you don't use the full deductible, we pay 100 and some percent, because whatever you have left, you put into your HSA and you keep. And then, of course, this budget also has $1,000 retention payments in it. There's a line item for $160,000. It would cover everyone except for the clerk and the treasurer and myself. Everyone would receive a $1,000 payment if approved by the board, and they would receive that in December of 2022 at the end of this budget. It's a retention payment. If you're still here in 2022, you can look forward to an extra $1,000 around the holidays. 2022 special appropriations. I've gone over a lot of these, so I'm not going to read them all to you, but we've talked about ambulances, we've talked about MERS contribution, we've talked about the redevelopment fund of $2 million. We've talked about vehicles. Here's something we haven't talked about. There's $40,000 in for the rewrite or the redo of the master plan. We did our master plan in 2017. Next year will be the 5th year, so we have money in there for that. Here's an important one too, a very expensive one, an adjudication machine for the clerk's office. A big ask, but it's in there. And these are the kind of things you can fund when you pay off your retiree health care and you start having extra revenue coming in that's not earmarked to pay for pension and health care. Because this would not have gotten past any other budgets. But this is a machine, as I understand it, that what really slows down the high-speed tabulators is you put 50 ballots in, and if there's one that has an error in it, they don't tell you which one. You got to go through the 50. The folks got to go through the 50 and find out who voted for 3 instead of 2. This marks the exact ballot where the problem is and will speed up tremendously the tabulation of high-speed, of the absentee voting count. And if I'm missing anything, I'm sure the clerk will fill us in on what I've missed on that, but I believe that's what the machine is for.
You did pretty well.
Okay, so that's a big ask, but it's in there. And also the $350,000 for the Daniels drain. Of course, it's based on us receiving half of that back. If you go to the revenue side, there's $175,000 in this budget on the revenue side for a 50% payment for the residents for the Daniels drain. IT support, the help desk that we have, the community guards, the Meals on Wheels, the Meridian band, it's all in there. Some equipment for HOMTV for the communications department, Prime Meridian, our flags, some new chairs and a treadmill for the police department, police education program, some new tasers and new radar equipment. And vehicles, Lake Lansing. There's $30,000 in here for diversity, equity, inclusion to continue our work in that effort. All that, as we wrap up here, all of that, where will our general fund be? And our general fund would be at about $8.7 million is where we would be. That's considering after all revenues and expenses. It puts us in a very strong position when our total general fund budget is around 20, depending on if you add in all the one-time expenses, but it's around $25 million. Summary, it's a strong financial outlook for the township, strong population growth, and investing in our core principles. And those principles: pension, police and fire, sustainability, recruiting, DEI, IT, local roads, our PICA'S, and our commitment to parks, open space, and pathways. That's a summary. I'm sorry I went on, but when you're covering $57 million, I want to make sure that I'm complete in doing that. And when it comes time after the hearing, the public hearing tonight, be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability.